Well, for me, I think the interesting thing about interactive communications is that it's everywhere. And for most people, it's very hard to see what is just out there all the time. They may use these technologies constantly, but they may not be aware of how it's affecting them and how their values and how their behaviors might be changing. So I think that the limits of interactive communications at this moment are really boundless.
The pace of change, technological change, has accelerated in the last several decades. Mobile technologies in particular have become affordable, smaller, sleeker, more powerful since the 1990s. And think of the features that virtually everybody carries around in their pockets, the capabilities that everybody carries in their pockets. It is enabling the typical person with a cell phone to become a citizen journalist if they want. And we see this in crisis situations where people are providing first-hand accounts, audio and video, audio and graphics, I should say, to document what's going on in the world around them and to provide their commentary.
With digital technologies, what we end up having is a situation where we can communicate anywhere, anytime, any place, as long as the systems are working. Now, one of the things that we often don't pay attention to is what happens when the systems don't work. Is there a redundant system? And this is one thing that we really haven't paid a lot of attention to yet, but the government has to pay attention to this, particularly for emergency response systems, for awareness of missing children, things like this. So the importance of some of the digital rollouts, the digital possibilities, are really quite enormous. And of course, the fact that digital communication can be sent through the air, it's a truly international phenomenon.
Everything has changed, and our communication technologies have impacted every aspect of people's lives, from their personal relationships to how they do their job, to the pace of their lives, to the amount of things that they feel compelled to do in in a multitasking format. Our personal and our professional lives become blurred. The workday is no longer, if it ever really was, 9 to 5. It's no longer 9 to 5. For so many people who would fall into the category of knowledge workers or symbolic analysts, I mean, any number of areas.
I don't think we know the limits of interactive communications yet, only because we haven't hit them. As a program, we know we cannot be all things to all people. In other words, we can't teach deep technology, we can't teach computer programming, while also teaching writing and have it all fit into a coherent 36 credit program. So what we do to define it as opposed to limit it is to keep it tied to what the industry wants us to do in terms of training students. That is, create content, do video, do audio, do interactivities, and so on and so forth. While including a strong technological component, we do want to focus on content creation, which is the role of a school of communications. So we may limit ourselves in terms of how deep we go into the technology, but we don't want to limit the opportunities for our students. So we do make sure that we're on top of things and have our curriculum reflect current changes in demand in the profession, as well as current changes in technology. As far as the wider field of interactive communications, we don't see a limit to it. We don't know where it's going to go. Nobody could have predicted 5 years ago where it is today, although many tried.
Well, I think the limits of interactive communication is actually set by the people who make artifacts that have interactivity and the control they set in interactive communication. I'll explain that a little bit more. And I think the other limitation is the audience who use an interactive way to communicate. So it's the idea that there's a audience and there's a storyteller, right? And the storyteller can be thought of more broadly. And the limitation of that is, how do you set rules in something that you create?
And it's true that you can it's true that you can have more or less interactive communication. Or to put it another way, you have communication that's more interactive or more narrative, right? So you have communication, for example, in a feature-length film. I would not consider the standard feature-length film to be an interactive medium right now. Sure, there's some kind of feedback. Sure, the director is plugged into the society, so you get some kind of feedback loop there, but it's not that immediate feedback. And that's very heavily narrative. And then on the very extreme other side of that is environments that are designed that people can react to and interact within. And so what we do is much more like architecture than it is storytelling. Sure, there's stories in that architecture, but really we're putting together a framework and having people kind of move through that framework. So if you're looking for interactive communication in society, you look for those spaces that are interacting, obviously, with people that are kind of interacting with the technology. And so my limits to that are, I think, broader than most people's. I mean, the obvious ones, websites, mobile communications, those are the ones that come to mind, or gaming especially, when you say interactive communication, because the industry has put an imprint on those kinds of things as being interactive. But I extend it to other things like spaces. Like when you're an architect, I think really what you're doing is interactive communication. When you're an urban planner, I think you're doing interactive communication. So I think it expands beyond kind of those common.
And from the other point of view, it's the audience, the user point of view, right? Mm-hmm. So, how do you basically, let yourself understand what's happening in whatever you're using to communicate interactively? And that could be partly because of your intimidation factor, psychology. I don't know computers, right? Mm-hmm. And the other one is, how much experience do you have with it? And and then also, what are your goals? What do you want to get out of an interactive, object?